Today on the Transplant Helper, I'm going to share with you the most difficult and painful question I ever have to answer here on the channel. As a matter of fact, this is just one of those questions I've heard so many times, and every time I hear it, it just draws at my heartstrings to try to give an answer. Stay tuned. Hit the subscribe button and the bell notification to become part of the Transplant Helper community. Hey folks, welcome back to Transplant Helper again today. My name is Jim Burrell, and yes, the question I'm about to answer today is just one of those I get all the time. Howbeit, I don't think I've ever got an email this long and this detailed in order to ask a very simple question, and it's basically, will things ever get any better? But nonetheless, even though I've already answered this person, I asked them for permission to share their email here on the channel because I really want you to get an idea of exactly the pain, the heartache, the doubt, whatever you want to call that they're actually dealing with now, because I believe that is a lot like many of us, at least at some point in the process post-transplant. Now, after we read through the email, I want to kind of review with you the answer that I gave them in short. And then at the end of this, I hope you'll stick around for that, I'm going to give you 3 things you ought to keep in mind in order to help to continue to keep yourself motivated and focused so that you can have the best recovery absolutely possible. So with that being said, I just want to look down here and read to you this email. I've got it pulled up here on my computer in front of me. It basically says this: Hey Jim, my name is Rodney from Beecher, Michigan, a small town, it seems, near Flint, Michigan. He said, I'm 7 months post-heart transplant, and I'm starting to doubt if things really get any easier. Since day one, it seems I've continuously had issues. First, I was in a medically induced coma for several days as the doctors tried to deal with some bleeding issues I had during surgery. When I finally woke up, I learned that my kidneys did not follow suit. Sometimes people call that and their kidneys don't wake up. But I learned that my kidneys did not follow suit, and I required dialysis for almost 3 months. This delayed me in getting discharged to begin my rehab by nearly a month. He said, which I was told would take only about 7 to 10 days. Now, I don't think he means the rehab. He just means kind of getting out of the hospital and get going. 6 weeks of cardiac rehab almost killed me, as I just couldn't find the strength to reach my goals. Then he said, just last month, I was told that I was an R2 rejection, and that terrified me to think that I might have to be relisted and start the whole process all over. Thankfully, after a week in the hospital and some huge med changes, things were getting back to normal when I found out that I have CMV from my donor. And then he adds, I saw your video, by the way, and it really helped. He's talking about the CMV video. I'll link it up here in the corners as well as in the description below. Keep him going. He says, the medication they placed me on is Valsite. It is very expensive, and this just makes my issues with poor insurance and little to no income seem impossible. He said, as a bonus, and I think he's being facetious, obviously, he said, as a bonus, my sternum hasn't healed properly, and they want to do a surgery to fix it, but they can't until I'm CMV negative and rejection free for a month. Sorry for rambling and seeming ungrateful. I know that I'm very blessed, but some days I just can't help but wonder if I've made the right choice to be transplanted. Is that wrong? Will it really ever get any better, he asks, and how and when? Then he adds, thanks for your videos. Without your videos, I don't know where I'd be right now. But anyway, that's from Rodney. Again, wow. All I can say is the reason I asked him again to share this email is because I think his struggles are very similar to many of ours. That is, when things just continue to stack one issue upon the next, it can get extremely frustrating. It causes some doubt and causes us to get, just, I don't know what to call it, other than just really almost depressed and concerned that things will not get any better. But my answer to his question the other day in short was probably. And I mean by that, probably. Things will probably get better. I've told you many, many times, the first year post-transplant is generally speaking the most difficult year. Okay, the first year is the most difficult year. That's the year when you're the most immunosuppressed, when most of the medication levels are extremely high, when your body's not only trying to heal from surgery, but adjusting to a whole new lifestyle, adjusting to all these medications that have been stacked on you, most of which actually you probably never taken before in your life. And things are just hard. I mean, that's the time when you got to be the most cautious about getting out and about, catching the colds, the flus, the viruses. In our case, in the last year, COVID-19, other things, the potential there for getting sick with unrelated issues to your transplant directly is really there. In addition to that, yes, there's the possibility at least that you could run into some type of rejection. As a matter of fact, I've shared the statistic with you here before. Approximately 80% of post-transplant patients experience some form of rejection within the first year. Now, that may be almost non-existent, like an R1. It may be more moderate to mild, like an R2, like he mentioned, or it may be more severe, like an R3, each of which are treated very differently. But there's always a potential there for that, in addition to pretty much everything else we have to worry about. Now, as far as his specific issues, I've just seen it too many times. Not all of us, really experience that, but I've seen it too many times where it's just those small setbacks in the very beginning. Things like him having bleeding issues and being kept in a coma. Things like his kidneys not following suit or waking up. Things like having CMV. I think the majority of us at some point, if we are CMV negative, we're going to run into a CMV positive donor, and thence we're going to have some issues with it. Now, Valsite, he mentioned, is the perfect medication for that. As a matter of fact, it's nearly ideal for treating or at least keeping the symptoms at bay concerning that. But oftentimes you'll be placed on that in the beginning. If they know that there's a CMV mismatch, then you'll be taken off of it. And then soon after, a lot of us start developing symptoms. A lot of us become CMV positive ourselves, and then you're back on the medication. And Valsite is probably one of our more expensive medications, depending on insurance. Now, obviously, he mentioned his insurance wasn't very good, and he has little to no income because he hasn't been able to return to work and such. So, there's just difficulty upon difficulty. And so I just want to encourage him, as I did when I spoke to him. I actually called him on the phone when I spoke to him. Rodney, there is hope. There's a way out of this. Things do improve day by day and slowly over a process. But you just have to kind of wait that out. And you have to always be ready, because it's kind of like the storms that pass through my area in Alabama. We've been dealing with this for about 2 weeks. The sun will come out and the sun will shine so brightly, and you'll think, well, here we are. We're in the middle of summer. It's just going to be hot and humid. And then boom, a thunderstorm arises, and you have to take a step back. And so we've had rains, and then we've had sunny days, and they're just mixed. And I think that's the key to kind of keeping all of this in mind, is there will be some storms. There'll be some rough patches, if you will. But in general, the sunshine's coming back in the morning. So just look forward to that and continue to improve day by day. So things generally do get better, but things can be kind of hard, particularly in that first year. Let me add to that, and I've done entire videos on this. Don't think after you get out of the first year that there's never going to be any issues, because I've seen people who have a really rough first year, and then a really great second year, and then a really difficult third year. Hate to admit it, but because a lot of those immunosuppressants are brought down to minimal, what would you call it? Maintenance dosage. A lot of those medications that you had in the beginning, things like Valsite, things like prednisone, other medications, the antibiotic that you might have been on, like Bactrim, all those things are let go and they're dropped, and then you're just open and susceptible to here we go again. So just keep trucking, keep pushing on, as I often say on the program, KOKO, keep on keeping on. I think that is the key. But with that being said, I wanted to share with you 3 things that I've come to know, and this is through experience. This wasn't just kind of sitting down, jotting things down, although I did that in the end. This is kind of with experience, things that I've learned, for lack of better terms, the hard way, from what I call been there and doing that. Not have done that, but have been there and doing that. And I think these will help to motivate you. Number 1, consider this in your mind. You need to live big, but think small. And I mean by that, every single day that you wake up post-transplant is absolutely a blessing. I don't care how bad that day seems. If you're, as we would say in the South, on top of the ground and you're breathing, every day that you have post-transplant is a wonderful gift. Every moment, for that matter, is a wonderful gift. For example, I've had 7 years post. I didn't do the math on that, but that's an awful lot of days, an awful lot of hours and minutes, seconds even, that I've had with my family, my friends, to experience life. And I think you always need to live big. You need to wake up every morning for whatever energy you have, whatever stamina you have, or whatever, and take advantage of that in the biggest way that you can. But while you're living big, you also need to think small, because I think a lot of times the reason I, at least in my past, got very frustrated within that first year is because I always set those bars, those goals, seemingly too high for myself. I always, I wanted to be, like I complained to my doctor. I was 3 weeks post-transplant. I went in and said, I just feel like trash. I'm not all better. And he said, Jim, you've been in stage 4 heart failure for over 3 years. You can't expect to be better in 3 weeks. So you just got to live big, meaning take advantage of life, but live small. And that is, take advantage of the small improvements, the increments that you go through. And I think you'll be better off. And that's kind of related to the next point that I want to add. And that is number 2, I want you to see the process and not the problems. See the process and not the problems. Because a lot of times what we don't understand about this life is that every day is a day to build. It's a day to build one day upon another. And each and every time that you're tested, that you're tried, or that you go through a difficult stance, it's really just a whole process in order to completely develop you and to heal you mentally, physically, emotionally, and sometimes even spiritually. You're built, you're strengthened every time you go through something difficult. I think the saying of the 80s at least was, no pain, no gain kind of a thing. And that's a little bit how this life is. It is an incremental process. It's something that we deal with every day, and every day is kind of those building blocks that continue to stack one another. But if you don't see the process over the problems, you will get frustrated. Now, I'm not taking away anything from the email I just read you, particularly you, Rodney. I'm not saying anything against you. We've already had this conversation. But the problems that you listed, I'm going to turn those around. Every problem that you listed have taken place within inside of a 7-month period. That seems negative, right? It does. But keep in mind the number of problems you're getting behind you now. You've dealt with the rejection. You dealt with, or let me back up. You dealt with the bleeding in surgery. You dealt with the kidney failure to an extent, the dialysis. You've dealt with the rejection. You've dealt with so many of these things, these sternum issues. So many of those things are getting behind you now. And those are problems of the past. Will there be any more problems ahead of you? Likely, yes. But those are problems of your past. So see those problems of the past as a victory and use those as part of the process and focus on the process, not the problems. Okay. And then number 3, this is one I've shared many times, albeit with different words, but I want you to compare with no one, but inspire someone. Compare with no one, but inspire someone. Because a lot of times the reason we feel like we failed in our recovery, to be honest, totally honest, is that we meet up with someone in clinic, or even more likely now, we see someone in a Facebook group, maybe even a transplant group, and they tell their story about how they were in the hospital for transplant, out within a week, back to work in 3 months, and, had no problems, no issues. And we say, man, I'm just not doing good. I'm not doing anywhere near as good as this person. And so I feel terrible about it. Well, the truth is we all recover differently depending on where we started. As a matter of fact, a lot of that comes down to where we started. How bad off were we? How sick were we before transplant? And you got to come through that whole recovery process. Kind of goes back to the story I shared a moment ago about the 3 weeks of frustration, having 3 years in stage 4 heart failure. You just can't expect that much. And I can't look to one person or another and say, well, their recovery is the prime example that I need to follow and I need to expect. No, don't do that. Don't compare with anyone. Now, you can ask advice, you can ask suggestions, and this video is really about encouraging you to say things can get better. And I love to hear those good stories about how things did kind of come out of the storm and improve. But don't compare yourself with anyone. You do what you do the way you do it, and you recover the best you can the way you can, basically. And in doing that, I promise you, the main thing you need to focus on is inspiring someone else. There will be someone who is in and I'm going to use a term we use only here in Alabama maybe, who are in a worser place than you are. Yeah, I said worser. They're in a worser place than you are, and that is they're going to need to know about you. They're going to need to be inspired by your story. And maybe you're reading your story like I even did when I first saw the email, with a lot of, frustration and sympathy, and I felt so sorry for Rodney. And yeah, but again, Rodney's been through this. These are things that he's been through, some of which he's still going through, but he's been through this. And I'm inspired by you, Rodney, that you've come this far, that you've had as much success as you have, and that you've continued to survive and to fight. Transplant patients, all of us, we are warriors, friends. We are warriors in this case. And we deal with some issues that I'm thankful that the majority of the general population never has to deal with. Having a transplant is still a rare event. Back when I had my transplant in 2013, in the state of Alabama, there were 23 heart transplants that year. 23. Now, that doesn't mean there wasn't more who needed such, but only 23 of us got the blessing of going through this process. Only 23 in Alabama, got to that point. So I'm thankful for that. So just remember those three things. Live big, think small. See the process, not the problems, and compare with no one, but inspire someone. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you hadn't already subscribed to this channel, I would encourage you to do that right now. Videos are coming a little bit slower than they used to. It's hectic. I've got a life, but I'm going to continue to produce those videos that hopefully can help to advocate, educate, and motivate you as a transplant patient. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay stronger, friends.